Welcome back, guys, to part 3 of part 17 of our inventory system, which is part of our series, the Construct 3 top-down series. Now, that was a mouthful to say, but that's how complex this is starting to get. Now, I'm going to do the prep work as we always do. I encourage you to go look at video 1 and 2 to get to this point to understand how the inventory system works. But I also went ahead and completed all the other steps, but we'll go through it. I'm not going to expose everything to you in this one video. But what I did realize, you could say, yesterday while filming this video, or the one prior to that, sorry, is that this is going to take extremely long. And then I ended up building all the functions, and it took me 2 or 3, 4 hours with trial and error. And there's just no ways I would be able to upload a video of that size, firstly, and furthermost, to keep your attention long enough to understand what's going on. So I've sort of fast-tracked a little bit. I'm going to show you what the end product looks like, and that's going to be quite simple. Let's go over to our stage 1. I've just gone ahead and plotted the scene with some items. And if you go ahead and play that, you can see here's our character. If I press I and I click on, you'll see that this tab, weapons, is default highlighted. It'll change if I select whatever one first. So if I click on the potion, there you can see it added a potion. If I click on another one, just slots it all in nicely. We haven't gone ahead and dropped the items yet. I still need to create that function, but we'll do that in a separate video. And then if I go ahead and add the swords, you'll see it highlights the swords tab. And if I add another one, there it goes in. And if I add 2 of the same one, it will go ahead and say there's 2 of those. And then we're going to have a tooltip over here, tells us what type of sword it is, because I've given the swords different names. Okay, so that is what we're going to try and get through today, but I will probably break that up into 2 as well. So this is definitely going to be a part 5 series in terms of the inventory alone. Okay, so that's the end result that you theoretically want. Now we've gone ahead and created the inventory, the working. This we've gone ahead and created in volume 2, so we're going to bring that to life now. So there's a few things we need to do. So I'm going to go over, just tell you what the prepping is. Over onto our global layers, we had our inventory. You went ahead and you made the blocks and you set the slots, etc. I need you to add another one and call it inventory objects. Just a blank layer for me with nothing in it, and you can set it to initially visible, but set the parallax to 0, 0. And then go ahead and also add that to your stage. So back to your stage, go in and add it so that it is there. This is the layer to which we're going to want to spawn the objects that you see inside the inventory. Okay, so that is a very critical thing. Then I went ahead and I cloned the 2 items that we had, the object item potions inventory and the weapons. That was part of the family called inventory items. I went ahead and cloned that. Okay, so I want you to go make a clone of those, and then once you've done that, that basically means that when I click on this set potions inventory, I've got, remember, these 3 scenes over here, animation scenes. If I went ahead and cloned that, and I jumped over to, let's say, the game, which I'll call it, it's got the same character, so it's the same object theoretically. Okay, so just clone that and rename it to _game. So we've had inventory in our previous video. I want you to go ahead and rename yours to _game. Okay, so that's pretty important. Then I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and create another family and make it also _game items. Now, why have I done that? We've got the inventory items, which is what's going to appear in the inventory. The inventory game items is what I want to appear in the game. Okay, so that way my code will make a lot more sense when you read it. All right. So once you've gone and done that, basically the same, I want you to clone the same instance variable. So if you look at your previous video and you look at the inventory items, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instance variables. But on the game items, I don't want to have the slot ID family. Okay, so just remove that one. So when you come here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instance variables, and that's part of the inventory game item. Okay, so that's really our prepping scene. And once you've gone ahead and done that, you can go and drop 1 or 2 things into your objects, and then we're going to use those objects to pick those up. Okay, so I'll give you a second to go and prep that, and then I take it once you've done that, we need to make use of our dictionary that we went and added, and my dictionary is under the dictionary systems, and I've called it item _ properties. Now the item _ properties is just going to keep the naming conventions and stuff to make things really tidy, in the sense that you might want to have, especially with if I go over to our global layers, this little text box here. we might want to have a couple of words and things to say about the sword or the potion, what it does, what mana it gives, where does it heal, where would you use it, etc. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be using the dictionary for, to use the variables on the creation to then go and set it. Okay, so just to recap, back to your object layers, you've gone ahead and made another family called an inventory game items. You've gone ahead and basically added the same properties, making sure that you keep the underscore family, guys, otherwise it's going to get very complicated. So if I go over to my inventory here, you'll see I underscored it fam, because when we start equaling and matching constant variables against each other, comparing variables, you want to make sure that the fams are the ones that are referenced as family, otherwise it's going to get untidy. Okay, so over back onto our inventory buttons, you saw in the last video, the last thing I want you to go and do is add the object like we said here. Now that we've created this new layer called inventory objects, go and set it to visible, and then you can go and set it to invisible on the files. Okay, now you'll see there's two functions that I've gone ahead and added, and this is called the inventory update function. So that's where we're going to start. So those are the two things you should be missing now. If you look at this carefully, you should be missing the call inventory update function. Now before we can do that, we need to go ahead and create a new function. So I want you to go ahead and create a new subgroup and call it inventory functions. We just do that by right clicking, obviously, as you guys know, and we add group, and you can call it inventory functions. Right, so once you've gone ahead and done that, I want you to click on the group that you created. I want you to right click and say add, and I want you to select function for me. And then go and give it whatever name you'd like. So yeah, you can just say inventory update function. That way it makes sense like mine. Okay. So once you've gone ahead and added the inventory update function, you will basically have a blank function. We're not passing any variables into this. Before we start with the function, I want you then to go over to your code and then call the function. So in our player is inventory active, system trigger once. I want you to go ahead and add the functions, call it, and we do that by add action functions. And we're going to call that function, which is called inventory update function. Click next, and there it is. I want you to go ahead and do that for the player inventory active, as well as when we are in this line of code here, that one on the click. Mine's on left click, obviously. You can, like I said, make that assign it to whatever you want. But based on our demo, on the left click, look for the next one here where animation is playing. I want you to go ahead and say function and call the inventory update function. This now function is used to sort the table. It's going to sort it every time. This function we're going to be calling often, and that'll sort out our count as well as the sorting of the items in the respectable slots. Okay, so over to our inventory update function. Yours will be empty, so don't stress. I want you to go ahead and say right click, add another condition, if that makes sense, or yeah, in your function itself, just say add another condition. Oh, sorry, it's a sub event. Sorry, go and add a sub event. And then once you've done that, I want you to select system. And then I want you to select the for each variable here. So if you type in for each, just type in each, it will come up. And I want you to select the for each. Okay, so basically our code reads as follows. On the system, for each of those green slots that we created, we want to then go and create these items. First one being, don't worry about the sub here, I'll explain the condition next. We want to basically take our object and we're just going to set everything to 0 and to null, because of the fact that we know that if it's empty, we want it to be empty. And once we obviously have a slot that's filled, we will set it respectively. Right, so the first one we're going to do is set our global variables. So, but we just basically click on we select the object, which is just this little block that you guys made, select the object, and we go set a value, and then the first one being, what we've got is item name. So we're going to select the item name, which is default, and you leave it to blank and you click next. Right, the same we do for quantity. You select your quantity and you set it to 0. And the same with the object, you go and set the prior to 100. This is just from 0 to 100, prior being the 100 being the highest. And then obviously our text inverse item quantity. This is the layer that does the counting. So the little zeros that you see here, that is what I'm now setting as well. So going back to my code, I go and set it to 0. And then I go and set the text. So again, I select that object. I'm just going to go back for you guys. I select the txt object that I created, the sprite font, and I go and set the text. And I want to set the text to the object inverse slot dot item quantity. The item quantity, just to be clear, is an instance variable that sits on this object. So if we go back to our object, as you guys know, you'll see we've got instance variables that we have on here. Here are those instance variables that carry certain params, and we can pass this param by using the full stop. Okay, so we pass the param by saying the item quantity, which is this one here, item quantity. Right. Then over onto this condition, basically we want to check to make sure that the slot ID that we have set on the txt sprite, the slot ID here, because it's got an instance variable as well, we want to make sure that it is equal to the green slot ID. So that's the condition. So when you've got your first condition, I want you to right click and add another condition and select your txt, and then we can say compare an instance variable, and we can go its slot ID is equal to its object. Type it in, object. It all should all just appear for you guys. Object dot slot ID. Right. So that's how we're going to add the condition. So here you'll see there's two of them. Right. Sorry that I had to do it this way, gents. It's just so much coding, and the video is just going to become so long. Right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add a sub event to this event. So once you've gone and done that, we're going to go add a sub event. So we right click here and we say add another. On this one here, add a sub event, and then we'll give you an empty sub event to start with. Here we select our inventory items. Those are the families. Inventory items are everything that correlates to this. Inventory game items is everything that correlates to the game. Let's just be very clear on those things. Okay. So back on that, we're going to go inventory items, and we're going to say compare an instance variable. In this case, we are comparing the item type family. It'll have its own parameters, and it's equal to the global variable being var inv active category. We're comparing that this is the category in. We add another condition, so we add a condition to this. Once you've corrected that condition, add another condition, and we say we compare the slot ID to the green little slots that we have. So we again compare an instance variable, slot ID, go and select, is equal to the block slot ID. Right, this will just appear up, as I told you, it's for that is the instance variables that belong to this class. Okay, so once you've gone ahead and done that, you can basically copy these things here. You can basically copy all 5 of these lines if you wanted to, paste them here, and then just go and change them. So we've got that set to 0. We're setting name now to the inventory items.name fam. Right, that is the instance variables that belong to the family, which is called instant items here on the right hand side. Okay, so you need to go and set each one accordingly. They all carry the fam parameter, so set them all accordingly. And then once you've done that, we set the sprite font as well. We basically say enter the text. So in this case, we say the text of the sprite font, and we go and set it to the item quantity. And then furthermore, the sprite font has an instance variable. We set the quantity to the object inverse slot item quantity. That's the slot that we're referring to. Okay, so once you've done that, that is basically our first and most critical function for the updates. That function is called, as you guys know, as I said, it's called in the category as well as on the initializing of the inventory. So it sorts it every time. So those are 2 very critical functions. Okay, so I'll give you a second to do that, and once you've gone ahead and done that, and like I said, pause the screen here. The best way to always do this is to pause the screen, the video, and then go make sure that each one is done accordingly. If you use the same naming conventions, you'll understand it. The reason why I'm not just showing it to you and then letting the video end is because I need to explain each and every single one of these to you so that you understand what the code is doing. It's no point just copy pasting code and you don't understand the logic, right? So once you've gone and done that, guys, that is our first function. I know it's time consuming, but that's the first one. Right, so the next thing we want to probably do is, and I want to just check, I'm going to just close our inventory buttons because we're now done with inventory buttons. That's now closed. That's how simple it is. And we've got 3 other functions that we still need to do, and then the action functions. Right. So back over to our I want you to go and make another, what do you call it, a subgroup for me. Right, so I'm going to close inventory functions for now. Okay, don't worry about the other 3. I want you to go ahead onto your inventory, and I want you to say add a new group, right? Add a subgroup, basically, a blank, where's the group? Come on. Yeah, add subgroup for me. And once you've gotten that, I want you to go ahead and call it inventory action. Right, so just go and do that first. Right, so now that you've got your inventory action, there is a few things that we're going to want to do with regards to the inventory action. Now this one is a complex one, just to be very clear, but this is the action that's going to take place with regards to clicking on the items. Now, but before I do that, I want to first do the hover over item, not these two at the moment. Right, so we're going to just ignore these two for now. So I want you guys to create a new action, and I want you to say mouse, select your mouse, which is going to be mouse, and we're going to say is hovering over an object, and select your object, which is going to be your family. So you select your inventory game items. Guys, this inventory system will not work if you start getting these two confused. So try and stay with me. Try and use the same naming convention or easier ones. Mine can be a little confusing. So we say select the inventory game items. And once we've gone and done that, now just remember I'm replicating what's above here. We can go and check and see if it's visible. So we add another condition, and we go inventory game items, and we go visible in the code, and we check and see if it's visible. That's the condition, and then we can go and add our action. Okay, so this is this over here. So I'm just going to quickly do that. So we go and add an action, and the first one is we need to go and set a global variable. So we do that by add, we click on our system, and we go set value, and we set a global variable. These are our global variables, and the first one I'm going to do is our var target UID. Now just remember, if you're missing a global variable or anything like that, like I said, just add it along the way. In case the prep scene, I might have left something out, but you should have 4 global variables. You might have 3. I might have forgotten to share with you that the var underscore world underscore item quantity needs to be added. So just make sure that those 4 are there. And once you've gone ahead and added those 4, that's the only 4 you're going to need throughout this whole inventory. All our code is going to be in the main. There's no other code or anything as such. So it should be easy to understand and articulate. Right. So back to our code. We go and set the global variable, as I said, to the inventory games items.uid. That is the family, just to be clear. We're calling it unique identifier. Right, so we're going to set that. So once you've gone ahead and set that, we then can go ahead and add a sub-event. And the sub-event that we're going to create here is twofold. What we want to do in our game, when we've got our items eventually, so let's say this is our game, and we want to have where we can select 1 drop or 2, very much like Fortnite or anything like that. So if I click on inventory, and I add these 2 swords, okay? I'll go ahead and add those 2 swords. You want to have the ability to hold in shift, in my case, the code showed, that I can drop one of them, or I can drop both of them by releasing shift. I can drop both of them. Okay, so that's pretty cool in case I want to drop everything. All right, so that's the purpose of what this code's going to do here. So we're hanging over with the mouse cursor. We're making sure that's visible. We're setting the UID. Then we're going to say keyboard is pressing down. If in this case I selected shift, if I'm pressing shift down, I want you to go and add another global variable and set the global variable, say system, set global variable, which is our var world item quantity, and I want you to set it to 1, meaning by default, it's going to be 1 if I hold down shift, okay, to the number. The next thing I want you to do is the keyboard again. I want you to go ahead and add another sub-event, select the keyboard, and if it's not done, you can just copy this line. If you really want to, you can just take this whole line like this and copy it down, and then just invert it. Go invert, and then we can change it here. All right. So you can just do that to make it a lot speedier for you. And then here, instead of setting it to 1 like we did there, we're going to go and set it to the inventory game items, which is our family, dot quantity fam. Okay. That is the quantity with regards to the items on the sword, because that sword could have 2 swords lying on top of each other. That's why we passed that variable. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you why, because when I drop both swords, there will be a 2 times on that sword. So when I pick it up, it's going to be 2 swords. All right, just to be clear. Right, so once you've gone ahead and done that, we can then add another condition to the inventory action. Click on add sub-event, and I want you to then do the mouse cursor is over the instance inventory gaming items. I want you to invert that. So again, the same as this one here, I want you to go and invert it. I then want you to add another condition, and I want you to select the system trigger 1. So add system, type in trigger, and I want you to say trigger once while true. Select trigger once while true. Add that as a sub condition, and then we can go ahead and set the 2 global variables that we have to target var target underscore item UIDE to 0, and then again they set the world of item quantity to 0. Right, so that basically is going to do the following. If we go ahead and run, if you've got your objects, and then go and test our code. If we run our objects and we click on our system, and we go down to our global variables, you will see global variable is 0. If I come with the mouse and I hover over, what's happening? It is showing us that it's got 1 to the family. It's got 1 to the family. 1. So if this is 2 pots, it's going to show 2, if that makes sense. And that is the reason, that is the piece of code that you've just created. Alright. So make sure that is working when you check it. That way you know that your code to this point is working as intended. Okay. And that is our, from here to here is the code. So pause the screen, make sure everything looks exactly how mine does before we continue with that. Right. So now that you've got that sorted, that just means that we've got the hover over, which is fantastic. Now we're going to do the next following thing, which is important. We're going to, and this gets a little bit more complicated in the sense that we still have a few more functions. I'm going to go ahead and close this function. And then we're going to work with our, what we call inventory put item to slot function. I want you to go ahead under your inventory functions, where you're seeing 1 now, you should potentially see 1 if you just minimize it. So minimize your 1, you should see 1 like this. I want you to go there and add another function, add a new function, click add function, and call this function inventory underscore put underscore item to slot. That means we're going to take the item and we're going to put it to the slot. Okay. So once you've gone ahead and done that, we're going to add a new sub event. So in this case, like I said, here's the code. You should be able to copy and paste the structure, but let's understand the code. So we're going to go add a sub event as we normally do, and then we're going to check the slot ID of the square block, the green square block, right, our empty slots, and that it's equal to the global variable, which is our empty slot. This one, we're making sure we check it. So we're going to go check the inventory, and then we're going to add a sub condition to it, right? Right click, add another condition. We're going to go inventory games item, we check in the family, and we want to pick an instance because there's multiple objects on this stage. There's multiple. We need to check the unique ID, which is the unique ID here, to make sure we're dealing with this specific instance. That is vital. Okay, so back to our main, we go back to our code here, and we say pick an instance with UID, and we want to make sure that it is equal to the var target item global variable. You'll put that in. So you will go pick by unique ID instance and then var target. Okay. Once you've done that, you should have a blank sort of action on the right. Then I want you to right click and add another sub event, right? And I want us to say system checking the global variable, the global variable, and we want to make sure that it's equal to weapons. Now this is where you're going to have to manually say, if you've got weapons, let's say armor, potions, materials, you're going to have one class for each one of those. Okay, just be very clear. So in this case, I've got my first one, which is weapons, making sure, very important, that it matches the item type family name. What does this mean? Everywhere we had our families, we had an item type family name. It's set to multiple now, but inside here, when you've made your potions, you remember I used potions and weapons. Maybe you should have done plural or not, doesn't matter. Make sure that that name there is the one that corresponds to this name here. The same as my inventory items, stick with the same. If I go into these objects, well, you can't see it now, but if I go into those objects, that item type family name is matching potions, it's matching weapons. Okay, so please make sure that you use that respectively. If I go over to my global layers, object bank, all our objects that we had, I just went ahead and dragged, for instance, potions inventory here, and I added the weapons inventory here. What that does is when you add it to the object bank, you can actually set the parameters there, because sometimes you saw there now on the right hand side that it's blank. If I click on it here, you'll see that you can't actually edit anything here. So by clicking on it here, it allows you then to change it. So there I've got my potion set, and I've got my weapon set. Right, and the quantity is 1 in this case, but that's irrelevant. We don't need to know if quantity set. You can leave it to 0, it makes no difference. Okay, so yes, the quantities, but this is the inventory I'm referring to. When you're in the game, you can do the same. So when you're in the game, I've got weapons, 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 and then potions. All right. So you can set them individually each, in case you want to, because we're going to add extra things to this. We're going to say, for instance, damage, how much this damage the sword can do. Then I'm going to add one here called damage. So this allows us to work with each item individually. Right, so back to our main. we're basically we're checking now the variable, the global active category variable against each one that I have. So I've got weapons and potions. So when I do the weapons, I'm basically saying on this block, I want to spawn. I'm going to go back here and show you spawn another object to this block. And in this case, I'm saying I want to spawn a weapons inventory item or a potions inventory, not a game. Remember, we've got don't get confused here, because we're now spawning the stuff to the menu, and I'm setting it to the inventory objects layer, this one here that I created in the beginning of the video, and I'm setting image point 0. Make sure it's not going to work if you're going to use the gaming object, where we've got object item weapons inventory, object item weapons inventory. It's part of the family of inventory items. If you select the game, the one that's got the word game in it, in my case, it's not going to work. Alright, so, well, it will work, but it might have different sizes, so it'll look funny. So there you go. I've gone selected that, created that, sorry, to spawn at a point. Then I've gone ahead and I've set the objects item inventory weapons, right, the same, because I'm dealing with the inventory. Make sure the word inventory applies. I'm basically setting the animation, and I'm playing it from the beginning, and I'm setting the inventory games items is the animation name. So the game items, if you look at the game items, I've got this ID underscore rusty sword, ID underscore steel sword. I'm setting those animations. Okay, so I want this one to play based on that one that's playing. Right? Then I've taken the objects again, the item weapons, and I set the quantity to the global quantity, which is our global variable, because that's going to be filled on hover. Remember the inventory action that you created? You said if you're hovering over, go and add 1 to the item quantity. That's what we're doing here. If shift's not down, add the global more than 1. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We are now setting the quantity family that belongs to this family of instance variable on weapons inventory to the right here under my inventory. I'm now setting it to the global variable. Same with the next one. The slot ID belongs to the inventory item family. I'm then setting the slot ID to be that value, the slot ID. So we know we are referring to that slot in question. Okay, and once you've gone and done that, you basically can click that whole block, right click, and say copy, well, whatever you do, Control C, and you can Control V right underneath. Go ahead and change it to your next one. That's what I did here, and then I just changed the respectable ones. Sorry, this respectable ones here. Now, a fast way of doing that is really simple. All you need to do in this case, for instance, is click on here, click back, and then select the next one of inventory, and just click next, and then click done. And then what that does is it actually just goes and changes it, but it remembers the last values in the last sort of tree moving backwards. So that is a cool way of doing a very quick, copying but pasting it, if you want to call it that. Right, so once you've gone ahead and done that, guys, we now have our put items to slot function. That is what's going to take our items and put it to the respectable slot, right? And that is a vital part of this video. Right, and once you've done that, I'll let you just look at it to make sure that everything copies exactly like mine, but now you understand what it's doing, which is vital. And we're going to go ahead and close that. All right, so now we've got 2 functions you should be seeing. We're going to go back to our inventory actions, and we're going to add a new inventory. Why? Because in here, in our actions, we're going to be calling a few functions that will manage our slots, if that makes sense. Right. So just want to minimize this quickly because we might need another function, the inventory back function. So before we get to this, so you should just have this and this, okay? But before we get to this, I think what we need to do is go and finish the other 2 functions. So let's go over to our inventory item move backwards. Okay, so go ahead here onto inventory functions, add another function, add function, and I want you to go ahead and create a inventory item move backwards function for me. Right, so this is the function that is going to move things back and forth and shift things around in the inventory. I'll show you how this works when we've actually created the drop function. We don't currently have a drop loot function, but this is quite important in shifting the items automatically correctly. So we go ahead and we create a system for each with an order. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to say system, and I click for each order, and I select my inventory items. We're dealing with inventory here. Inventory items, the expression that I want to match it with is inventory items slot ID underscore fam, and then click it to ascending. Right, that's the first one. Then I want you to right click, add another condition, and I want you to select the family, which is going to be our inventory items, and then we're going to compare an instance variable. We want to compare the slot ID of the family is greater or equal to the global variable slot ID. Greater or equal to the global variable slot ID, click done. And then we're going to do the same with inventory items, and we want to basically check the item type family, the potion. Remember what I just spoke about, the weapons. We want to make sure that it's equal to the category in question, right? So remember, we set it to weapons by default, but when you're selecting the different tabs on the buttons that you guys created, just to recap, very important to understand your code. Here we've got the different categories that we select. Remember, with the set var here, when we toggle in, if I go back to the game stage, sorry that I'm jumping around, but this is important to understand. If I go here, as I'm clicking these two, it's changing the category name for me because I'm in swords, now in potions. Sorry, weapons in my case, then potions. Okay, that's what that code did that you guys had. Right, so back to our function, which was, sorry, here we go. So we went ahead and we set the family type, the compare instance variable, selecting the item type, and it's equal to the category, right? And then the last one is we select the object. So we go and add another condition, and we're going to select our object, and we basically say slot ID, compare, slot ID, drop down select, slot ID is equal to, and this is where things get very interesting. I'll be very careful here. We want to slot ID is equal to slot ID, right, that you've got your value, and I'll just open this one here to show you. My family, I call the family first, I select the family instance variable, and then I plus one, space, and I plus one to this value. Okay, don't forget to plus one to the move backwards one for me. Once you've gone ahead and done that, because here on the moving up, we're going to do the identical function again, but the thing is we're going to subtract one here. Okay, so we'll get to that now. And yeah, then on the right hand side, the action, I want you to go to your inventory. I want you to select your family, your inventory family, and I want you to add one. Add to the instance variable called slot ID fan. So we're going to add one, and then click done. Then you'll have this one. Okay. And then here, we're going to do the same. We're going to go set the position. In this case, we're just going to set the position to, if I go back, set position to another object, click next, select your green slot, and set the image pointer to 0. Okay, and that will give you that. And then that is our items move backwards function, right? So that allows us to move the items around, and that will happen automatically. You won't have to stress about that. So take a look there, make sure you've got everything carefully. Remember the plus one, that the slot ID is greater or equal to. Okay, fantastic. And we're going to go ahead and add our last function. And it's a good thing that we're doing the functions now, because as we do the code and the action, basically we're almost done, and then do the inventory on created. And then you guys should have a working, perfect inventory system, really. So we're going to go down. So maybe I can squeeze this into 4 videos. We'll do this into 4 videos. Right, so the next one, we're going to go ahead and, again, add a new function, because you should have 3 now. Go ahead and add a new function. Right, and I want you to call this one inventory underscore item move up. So backwards and up. Should be down and up, whatever. You can call it whatever you want. And here again, we do the same thing. So basically, you could just copy what you had and basically clone this function, copy it, and then rename it, and then change 1 or 2 things. The first one is this function here, once you've copied it, needs to become -1. And then where we go on the items, inventory item slot ID family, instead of going greater or equal to, we're going greater. So we're just choosing greater than. That's the only thing you need to change. Now once you've gone and done that, you basically will have obviously this already. Go ahead and change the add to the subtract. So instead of add to, say subtract from, not the add to. And then compare you just open them both up and then compare that it looks the same, except that these 2 variables are different, as well as the subtract over there. Right guys, so that is our function. So that is pretty much the heart of our code. And let you just have a look at that, and we'll pause it. Go and take a look. So that is the heart of our code, and that is your 4 functions now. And you can go ahead and close it and never to come back to it again. Okay. So just make sure that it looks identical to mine and that you use the inventory items family opposed to the games, because that can be confusing. Now you do have your inventory action. Okay, so over onto your inventory action, you've got these two that we've gone ahead and tested. We're going to test these functions now shortly by adding a new function. Add a subclass here, and here we're going to go. I wonder if we shouldn't do this in another video. In fact, we might just do that in another video. Right guys, so I'm going to stop it there, and we're going to catch you guys in part 4 of this video, which is then going to focus on the inventory actions. I'll open it up here in case somebody wants to speed up on it. And this is basically going to be our actions, and then we need to do our inventory created, explain that to you guys, what that does with regards to setting the dictionaries accordingly. And after we've done that, everything should be working smooth as an inventory system should. Catch you guys in the next.